want to start out. You guys kind of inspired me, and as we've been working on this for a year, as I said, I've been thinking about Sauvignon Blanc for a long time, and I want to put something in your head before we start tasting. And I literally just lost my notes, so they're on the floor here somewhere, but I have them on my phone, so still rolling. Anyway, so not too long ago, I was reading through the Lewis Purdue email that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, and an article came up by Thomas Pilecchia. It was called Academics Explain Terroir, but Not Exactly the Way Consumers Might Think. I was like, what is this? What is he talking about? Dug into it a little bit further, and he was actually referencing an article that was in, or it was actually a paper, in the Association of Wine Economists. And it was titled Trade and Terroir, the Political Economy of the World's First Geographical Indications. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. It was basically saying that appellations were formed to satisfy a class of politically interested owners of land, historical producers. They were threatened from new producers' supply or access or trade routes, so they wanted to be able to say that their wine was of higher quality. So this is kind of how geographical indications are what we know today as appellations. This is how it started. So is that still happening today? So I just want to throw that out there. There was a couple of really good examples. I think Burgundy in the 15th century had some issues with domestic trade with Paris. Port and Chianti and Tokai in the 18th century with exports to England. Some issues there. And then Champagne in the 20th century. So this has been happening over quite a few years. And is this still happening? So, okay. That being said, let's move on. Feel free to taste through the wines as you like. And I'll go through them relatively quickly because I want to hear what you guys have to say.
All right, so we're going to give them 5 minutes or maybe 7 minutes to taste through all the wines?
No. You taste while I'm talking.
Oh, taste while talking. Okay.
So, I got the map in front of me. Good. Okay, we've seen a ton of maps today. We've talked about soils and we've talked about climate. So I'm going to breeze through a little bit of that because you guys are already experts. So you know where we're at. Hold on. I know I'm missing something. The one thing I do want to go back to is, like I said, you've heard all about this, the climate, the soil, the history, and all of that stuff. But I want to bring it home to my home. I actually grew up here. I grew up here in Lake County. I moved away. I learned some winemaking, initially vineyard stuff in New Zealand, and then ended up coming back. But growing up here, I've seen the weather patterns. I've seen this weather that comes from the Pacific Northwest. It rides the Highway 20 mountains of the Mendocino National Forest behind us. You can see on the other side of the lake. And it keeps the North Lake wet, and it keeps the South Lake dry. I've played in the dirt. All the different soil types around here at the lake. There's many different colors of soil, and we'll kind of go through some of those today. And then, even though the data for all of these different appellations looks really similar on paper, I think you'll see a significant difference in the wines. I tried to do these as sort of even keel as possible. It's pretty difficult to ferment 5 different appellations and keep an even keel while still trying to make commercial wine out of all of them. So I was able to control the things that I could control, and but I think you'll see a significant difference. So you know where we're at. We've got Mendocino coastline to the west. We've got the Central Valley to the east. We've got a giant mass of forest to the north of us, and then to the south is the well-known Sonoma and Napa wine-growing appellations. So here's all the wine data. It's also in your program for the nearsighted and farsighted people. And so just briefly, we're going to go through. I'm going to go back through these in detail, but I'll let you just know what they are. So Upper Lake is actually a proposed AVA. I'm going to go to the map.
We really do want to hear more about that, too.
well, I'm going to go back and forth.
All right.
So Upper Lake is in the north. Here's the Lake County Appellation map, which you've seen a few times. Jean-Jacques might complain about my very broad overview of soil types for that one region, but anyway, so Upper Lake is very very alluvial soils. And let me go back to the data. Oh, other way. Oops, too far. And so that was actually, and it's one of the cooler climates, so it was actually picked later. So I'm just going to briefly go through. So Upper Lake, Big Valley, Kelsey Bench, Red Hills, and High Valley. Those are the order of the wines. You have the wine data in front of you. Mm-hmm. We'll go back to that later, but then I'll talk you through each one of them in terms of what I think is different about each. You can see the row spacing, the pick date, the bricks, the press analysis, the final analysis, all that geeky stuff, that data is right in front of you. But I really want to talk about how they're individually different by terroir or by appellation. Okay, so we're going to start in Upper Lake. And so Upper Lake is pretty much on the valley floor. It's a proposed AVA. It's not quite approved yet. We're getting there. But so the lake level, let me go back, the lake level is about 1,300 feet. So slightly above. I gave you the median, the min and max, so that you can kind of see how high or low it is. Precipitation is average, the wind is low, and this is the coolest appellation within Lake County at 3158 growing degree days. The soil type in Upper Lake AVA is very alluvial. It's pretty steep and narrow valleys, and just the majority of the soil is alluvial. So taste that wine in comparison to the next one, Big Valley. So Big Valley, essentially the same elevation. However, the precipitation is much lower. So you can see kind of there's a lot more rain on the north side of the lake versus the south side of the lake. The wind is medium, and it's slightly warmer at 30 to 81 growing degree days. Now, these growing degree days I picked from, it was 2007 to 2017 data from April to October. And then, so tasting Big Valley, which has it's the Franciscan formation soils, which you heard about earlier today. It's that kind of old lake bed with the slip that happened, and the soil that cracks open and all the organic matter falls into it. That's that one. Yeah. Just really intense, low precipitation, and not as warm as other regions, but really intense flavors, I think. Going around the lake to the Kelsey Bench AVA, which is the yellow right there next to Big Valley. Kelsey Bench is interesting because it's actually 200 feet higher than Big Valley and kind of wraps around this area to the south of us from where we're sitting now. Slightly warmer, slightly higher, average precipitation. The wind here is quite high. You can almost set your clock to it at 3 o'clock every day. And then the growing degree days, again, warmer. So I think you'll see a progression as you go through these wines. They're getting a little bit more kind of riper or fleshier in style. Like I said, I tried to pick them all at the same bricks. I think I came within 1.4 bricks of all of them. And then, am I going too fast? You guys are right? Right, next one? You ready? So Red Hills, going into Red Hills. This is considerably higher appellation. Even though the minimum is at lake level, the majority of what's grown is around that 2,000-foot level. Because Red Hills sits right behind Mount Canocti, those weather patterns come through, kind of bounce across the tops of the mountaintops, and that one actually gets the highest precipitation. But it's also the most volcanic soils of anything. Very, very well drained. The soil is deep, but really well drained. Very windy, and again, a little bit hotter, 37.53. And these are bouncing between region 3 and region 4 growing degree days, which is, for being such a close location and having such a breadth of heat or heat summation, it's a pretty neat and diverse kind of area. So, and then go further back around. I encourage you to save a little bit of your first one so that if you taste the last one, we can go back around to the first one. So then we go to the north side of the lake. So that high valley, the elevation is right about the same with Red Hills. It's, again, the appellation goes to the valley floor, but the majority of what's planted is planted right around that 2,000-foot mark. And then, again, average precipitation, very windy on the mountaintops, and then the growing degree days are pretty same as Red Hills. Now, I think for me personally, what makes the biggest difference in these different regions is really the soil type. A little bit of it, I think, is the elevation, and a little bit, the precipitation and the wind and the heat. But I think the big piece is the soil type. And so the High Valley AVA is the Franciscan loam, but also some alluvial. And you go back to that upper lake, which is mostly alluvial. And then just to kind of whip around and mention them again, Big Valley, the really heavy old lake bed soils, the Kelsey Bench AVA, which is a mix of volcanic, mix of alluvial, has some clay pockets. And then Red Hills AVA is the super volcanic, everything drains through super quickly. So that's that. Don't forget to rank on your favorite to least favorite on your sheet. And so panelists, what do you think?
Just the opportunity to have the same winemaker take fruit from all these different places and try and make them as much the same as possible is the kind of learning opportunity that most people don't get.
Yeah.
So it's really valuable to have that. Thank you.
The rigor of the trial. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. And like I said, the things that I could control. They're all the same yeast, all the same fermentation temperatures, all the same nutrient. I want to say a huge thank you to Mark Birch and Jed Steele for donating their appellation pieces to this, and then also Clay Shannon and Chase Water for donating fruit, and everybody who kind of helped make this happen. So, thank you.
Go.
I was kind of wondering why, to me, the most extreme difference between any of the wines was the Big Valley and Kelsey Bench compared to each other.
Yeah.
And yet, they're the closest to each other and most similar elevation. And what do you think is the big? I know you said that Kelsey Bench is 200 feet higher, but what else is different between those two?
I think really it's the soil type. Because the Kelsey Bench has stepped up 200 feet, it's got a lot more volcanic matter into it. There's a lot of the creeks that are we've got the hills behind, and then we've got this sort of bench that wraps around the backside of the old lake bed that is Big Valley. And that bench is some volcanic from the volcano, but then also alluvial from the mountains coming down. And it all kind of comes down. And then Big Valley, because of this slip, has some alluvial because the creeks still roll through it. But most of Big Valley is this heavy, dark, lot of organic matter, old lake bed soil. And I think those are really the two biggest differences between those.
Can we assume that these are all the same clone?
Oh, yes. They're all Clone 1, all on 10114. Yeah.
One takeaway that I'm getting here is that temperature matters. You were saying that Upper Lake is the coolest of these regions.
Yep.
I think you're getting, it's that classic crisp citrus that, Alder, you were talking about, the right up the middle on the variety there compared to Red Hills, which has warmer fruit going to stone fruit. That's quite a split.
It is, yeah, and I completely agree. I didn't want to give you guys any tasting notes. I wanted to see what you thought, but yeah, it's really similar.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think that the Big Valley wine is showing some ethoxypyrazines.
Yeah, and I
Clone
think
one.
Yeah.
I think
What do you think?
stylistically it depends on winemaker and what you're looking for, and it kind of gives
Were
you an
you looking
example.
for that? Why me?
Because we own 1,200 acres and I don't have a choice. I take it all in anyway. But we do. There's some of our blends that we do want that. We make 3 Sauvignon Blancs and we need to make them all different. So it's important to our brands.
It's just nice to know that we can find it here, because we haven't really tasted much of it yet today. So
Exactly.
Thank you.